Wah 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 wah. Studio. Moshi, welcome back to Spasadic Studio. Today I'm going to be showing you an intermediary way to draw anime style heads. We're going to be reproducing a sketch I did of my OC Mari. Love her. You can check out the finished one on Instagram once she's lined and colored. Wink wink, join me over there. As usual, if you need a more helpful nudge in the right direction to start drawing anime, you can check out my beginner video for absolute beginners, or you can head over to my Patreon and make use of all the really great free bases that I've got on there. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about drawing and sketching using negative space and the paintbrush, so painting, erasing, and then just suggesting shapes. And this is going to bleed over into a larger conversation about how to gesture draw. We're not doing very complex gesture drawing today, and we're certainly not going to be doing gesture drawing in the realm of realism. This is just a really quick introduction. If you consider yourself sort of beginner to intermediary, this tutorial is still good for you because, again, we're not diving too much into technical skill and we're not doing a lot of guesswork or relying on muscle memory. We're really just going to be talking about some different ways to sketch. But I think that for the purpose of, let's say, children, it might be a bit much for them. So this is still beginner friendly. We're not really going to be reinventing the wheel here today. You can do this on any drawing software. As usual, I'm using Procreate. You just need to know how to switch between brushes and create new layers and move those layers around. So very rudimentary knowledge, not reinventing the wheel. And with that disclaimer out of the way, let's do it. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is pick a sketching pencil that you're comfortable with. I like my lines to be thick, so I'm going to go with 6B. And as usual, I'm using some decently vibrant primary color so that I can differentiate. So we'll do this in 2 passes. We'll start off with a layer, which is going to be our underpainting, and then we'll create a layer on top. So if we're creating this first layer, I'm basically just going to decide what direction I want my head shape to be pointing. We're going to go with 3/4 since we're going to be following the previous sketch I did of Mari. And remember that a rudimentary circle will help you a lot to determine where your forehead should start, and where that circle ends, we can assume that that's going to be the line for the nose. And I like to make thick lines because you can erase as you go to modify and refine shapes. So let's say you want a less cute looking face, you can start to erase the very exaggerated lines around the cheeks. And of course, make sure that you use your lasso tool if you feel that you don't want to just erase and redraw. Like, you totally can, but sometimes the lasso is just a little bit faster. And we'll keep in mind that our mouth should go at the halfway point between the nose and the chin. So I'll turn my opacity down and I'll create a layer on top, and now I'll pick a different primary color and we'll start going over any kind of sections that need to be refined. So I actually went back to my original layer here because I forgot to draw in the hands. And for the fingers, usually I just kind of show where they'll generally go just so that I know what I'm going for, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to make the fingers a little more clear, and then we'll do some more erasing. And so the reason that I say this is gesture drawing is generally, it's a couple lines that capture the pose and the motion of your subject. So we're not so worried about sketching everything perfect on the underlayer because we can go back and fix anything when we're lining. Essentially, we just want to capture the general motion, which in this case, we're doing kind of like the same as my logo. So the things that have the most variety or doing the most moving technically are actually the fingers, because everything else is going to be pretty static, and we're going to skew the fingers in a bit of a weird way to give that impression of motion. If you want to use a paintbrush to sketch, you can. So as you can see here, I'm doing a very rudimentary hand. I'm not paying attention to specifics at all. I'm just blocking shapes. And the reason that I'm blocking shapes is that with a little eraser, I can go in and create negative space anywhere that I've painted. And then when I sketch in the layer above this one, or if you're like me and you go directly to lining, I can tell what is going to be flesh by the amount of negative space. So again, I like a thick line because you can just keep refining and refining and refining. So we'll block with the paintbrush and then we'll carve out negative space, and that's going to be the other hand. And usually if I'm doing this, I'm not too fussed about things looking perfect because I know that either I'm going to create a second sketch layer or I'm going right into ink, and so it doesn't really matter because at this point I can sketch in technical pen, so it's not making the biggest difference ever in my life. But if you're more comfortable with it, you can continue to refine those painted fingers. I recommend taking like a red, a color that you're gonna definitely see that's gonna stand out, like I'm doing here, and then you would be able to basically redo all the fingers. So now that we've made our second layer, we'll pick a more vibrant color. I've lowered the opacity of the original sketch layer, and here we are. So we're just gonna go over the fingers. So as you can see, the negative space is basically just a hint. Like in gesture drawing, you're doing a couple of gestures to suggest motion. And so some people kind of find this hard because it's like you're suggesting shapes without blocking all of them out completely. And I think if you're not a seasoned drawer, then yeah, that can be very overwhelming because having an extremely painfully clear underpainting obviously is more helpful than the suggestion of motion. But it's good to get used to lines of motion, lines of dynamic motion and gesture drawing, because let's say you're out in public and you're drawing people, or you have a nude model and you're drawing on the fly, you're not always going to have like 45 minutes to sit there and make a perfect underpainting, especially as a professional artist. 9 times out of 10, that's a luxury that you don't have. And so carving out negative space or gesture drawing, it looks a little bit like you're doing chicken scratch, but personally, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with chicken scratch. You just want to get as much of what is in your imagination down on the canvas. And so you're kind of almost imposing a time crunch. But if you've ever worked in the industry, you probably already know. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. But this method has allowed me to get sketches, sometimes several sketches, rudimentary poses, thumbnails, done in 11 minutes or less. And I know that because I've looked at the data on Procreate. And so sometimes I can produce in the span of 10 minutes like 4 different thumbnails because I'm not really worrying too much about perfecting my underpainting. I'm just capturing as much motion as I possibly can. And so here I immediately noticed with Mari that I had actually made her sort of less round and less cute in the original image. I'm not sure which one of these to ink because I kind of like them both, but we'll add little ears. We're gonna give her little elf ears. I decided to go with a different elf ear shape here. But you can do human ears, or you can do the hair and then do some little ears peeking out. Basically, you're just testing to make sure that proportionally everything is in the right place. So my nose is in the right place. The line I've made for the mouth seems to be in the right place. Here I'm just kind of going back and forth on mouth poses. The ears seem to be in the right place. Your ears are very much on the midline of your face. There you go. And the skull is not looking too wonky, so we can add in her eyes. So at this point we can remove the undermost painting. And I'm a big fan of using the canvas itself to cut off anything to make sure that all the lines are even. So just grab it and cut it. And you can tilt your sketch if you want a more interesting sort of dynamic pose. And then we'll just refine anything that's looking a little wonky. Since this is an intermediary tutorial where I don't really expect you to have a perfect underpainting, and honestly, like, there's no need, because when you're inking you can still make adjustments. That's what I tend to do, but make full use of the eraser because you can thin out or taper lines to give yourself a bit more of a clear outline of what you want things to look like. And so if you have an idea of how you want your line weights to be different when inking, you can set the stage for that now by thinning out lines or tapering. And so we're gonna do the hair. I have basically just the frontmost hairline, so where the bangs are gonna end, marked out, and then the top of the head. And remember that hair is not shrink wrapped to your head, just like your skin is not shrink wrapped to your skull. So leave a little bit of a berth there, which is a fancy way of saying give yourself a little bit of space to work. This Mari turned out a lot cuter and rounder, and I think it's because I was drawing chibis before this. So we're gonna keep the sort of cute, round, childlike aesthetic by making everything else quite round. We're gonna keep the hairstyle kind of bouncy and fun and young and childlike. Maybe this will just be like Kid Mari. This will be Kid Mari before she goes to college. We'll add the horns. We'll add just very basic horn shapes so that we know more or less where we want them to go. In Mari's case, there's 3 of them. And again, just giving ourselves a little bit of space. I like to think of the bangs as separate from the back of the hair, especially if the hair is being tied up. So you almost think of the bangs as like a plate that is attached to the front of the head. If you've ever had to like deconstruct a Nendoroid figure, it's that. So you have a plate and then you have the back of the hair that's being pulled, in Mari's case, into these giant round pigtails. So I'll clean this up so that you can see it a little better here. So once I've got the plate, the frontmost plate figured out, I'm going to look at my reference picture again, and then we can add little accents. Again, I love the little triangle hairs that stick out on the side. And now we can deal with the back of the head. In the original sketch for the lanterns, I literally just pressed and hold circle shapes. But again, since we're kind of doing just a very basic tutorial here, we'll guesstimate the shape of 4 big balloons. There you go. And then you can cut off the edges to make sure that your balloons are symmetrical. Or if you want them asymmetrical, you don't have to cut off the ends. You can leave them as is. For the sake of showing you, I'm going to add the little details here. So we're doing the very moe style chunky fingers with the long nails because it's just what I've been into lately. And since this is going to be child Mari, we're not going to make them too long. But it's up to your discretion if you want to add little details in your underpainting or not. And then to really hammer home painting in the negative space, this is generally how I prepare the eyelids, or the eyelash line I should say, for social media. Is I carve out the shape and then you can just use an eraser to erase everything that is not your exact shape. So if you're feeling unsure, you could scribble it out, and then again using your eraser you're going to create negative space so that your sketch ends up looking a little more clean. But basically all that we've done is we've done some vague blocking. We've outlined the shape that we find within the blocking, and then we create this negative space to give the illusion that this perfect lash line was there the whole time. And I'll show you, since I already have a sketch of Mari, so I'm just gonna line them up, and as you can see, once we've adjusted for size and we've lined everything up, everything is basically in the exact same place. So we'll jiggle it around a little bit, we'll tilt it around, and we'll just make sure that everything is appearing in the same place. And there you go, Mari in 11 minutes. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that you learned something, and if you did, please do boimgle that spoimgle and squingle that bwingle and like, comment, and subscribe. As mentioned, the free Patreon bases are available right now for free on the free tier of Patreon. And how much does that cost, I hear you ask? It's free. It's free 99. Go use them. Go use them. It's good fun. You can trace over them. You can use them to helpfully sort of nudge yourself into the correct anatomical territory for your own drawings. I made them for you, so it's really dealer's choice. If you're feeling especially spicy, the paid tier of the Patreon is about to get its first exclusive long-form video, which will not be available to the general public. We're going to look at a very in-depth shading process. It's the process that I use, and we're going to talk about some really fun ways to add chromatic aberration and noise to your canvas to achieve different desired results. So that'll be really fun and cool. Come join our community of artistes. Thank you to the patrons. Cough cough. Again, if you join the free tier of Patreon, you can get a shout out in my credit section. Ooh, ah. Let me know in the comments what a good tutorial might be for the future. Let me know what you'd like me to explain, and I will do my best to explain it to you. And yeah, that's it. Come check me out on Instagram so you can see the finished version of Mari, and I love you very much. Goodbye.